Hi, this is Michael Waits recording live from the Singapore FinTech Festival 2024. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of Insurance for the New Possible, where we discussed the most innovative ideas in FinTech. We are joined today by Kaniyet Rayev, the founder and CEO at Boxo, also known as Kani, which, by the way, is the Japanese word for crab, just so you know.
That's how I introduce myself
That's how you
to
introduce yourself?
Japanese friends.
Do you really? I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us at the Singapore FinTech Festival 2024. It's awesome to have you here. How are you doing? How's the festival been for you?
It's great. We are day 3, but the energy is still like day 1, to be honest.
It feels like it.
Yeah, to be honest, I thought day 3 is going to be quieter, but it's,
Right.
it's not quieter. It's
The energy is great, right?
Exactly. It's
And
I love
particularly,
it.
I want to tell you this, like your booth in particular, people have been walking by, not only taking a picture of the sign, but touching it.
Wow.
Something good has
That's
been
weird.
done there. Anyway, let's jump right into this. Super apps. Let's define, just for people that may or may not know, right? Let's define what a super app is and maybe why it's become dominant in certain markets and not in other markets.
Yeah, so to begin, Super App is an app that has many services in it. For example, imagine you open an app. In the morning, you order taxi. In the afternoon, you use it for banking. In the evening, you book a restaurant. Later in the evening, you book a hotel or flight, and all is done inside of one app. So this is what we call a super app.
Right.
And the dominant super apps, for those who don't know, there's WeChat and Alipay in China. Both are massive apps. WeChat is 1.2 billion monthly active users, insane engagement.
Right.
And people essentially use it for everything they do on a daily basis. And now coming back to the question, why this happened in China, from what we understand is at that time, a lot of apps in China at that time, if you would focus just on one business line, you would generate only X number of X revenue from that service. But China being not as advanced in terms of economy compared to US, you cannot do that. So that's why a lot of companies just started to diversify a lot. And the path they decided to do it is to just plug in a lot of services inside of one app.
Right.
And that's where the kind of the whole super app movement started. And in the end, what happened is that everyone just loved the experience. Those who experience WeChat and Alipay, they love it. And when they move out of China, for example, they miss it. And and that's how super app started in China.
Right. That's in China, though, right? So I asked why it happens in specific markets and not in other markets. Why do you think, and I have my own opinion, that it didn't happen in the US, where the sort of app ecosystem is older, and even in Europe, where it's not as old, but still older than it was in China? What were some of the market dynamics you think that made a super app necessary, besides just this idea of revenue, but also why didn't it happen in other places?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess for the way we think, availability of certain services. So, for example, if you look into Southeast Asia, Grab is a good example.
Trying.
Yeah, exactly. So they launched rides. So this was the first service. Then they launched food delivery as a separate app. And because there was no food delivery platform.
That's true, actually. I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. And then in 2019, they decided to go into super app style and just moved everything inside of one app.
Right.
And now whenever they launch new service, they decided that instead of building it as a separate app, they'll just plug it in. That's why like banking right now is inside of Grab, delivery, groceries, etc. So we probably like as a first wave of super apps, it was just availability of certain services and the product decision to just, from technology point of view, put it all inside of one app. However, now we see what's happening in some of the developed countries, for example, UK and Brazil, for example, is the companies that became mature, like Revolut and Nubank. They, I guess, got to a certain level of maturity where they are now ready to expand into new verticals. And that's kind of the next wave of super apps emerging in some of the other countries.
So we talked a little bit about why it's good for the companies. But besides just like the pure convenience, why is it good for consumers? And here's the real question for me is, just because I'm great at building like a great financial services app, am I really going to be able to transfer that into building a great ride-hailing app? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So from consumers' point of view, honestly, it's really hard to explain without people actually going to China and seeing it firsthand.
Right.
So this year I was in China in April, and it was first time after COVID I went there. And So I came in, I downloaded Alipay, asked my friend to top it up, and pretty much for the whole journey, so I was there for 2 weeks, I just used Alipay for everything I did. So
on purpose, right? Kind of
not even on purpose. It's
really?
like, yeah, because like, let's say I need to order a cab, right? I don't want to go to App Store and download it, set up an account,
for
set
DD
up a
or
bank
for some
account.
other thing, yeah?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that's what I do in other countries. I go to, let's say, like Dubai. In Dubai, I have to download Kareem.
Right.
I have to download Talabat for food delivery.
Right.
I have to download like airport app to navigate
You're already
myself.
annoyed.
Yeah, exactly. And there are like 10, 15 apps that you have to download in one country. You need to set up an account everywhere, and you need to add payment method to pay as well. Whereas in a super app, in Alipay, for example, I was like real life examples. I ordered food, I ordered taxi, I booked railway tickets. I was running out of power a lot, so I had this like portable chargers I could rent. So it's all was done inside of one app, and I had to download literally one app for everything. So from consumers' point of view, again, like those who live there, they really appreciate it.
Right. But also for those traveling there, right? You're right. Yeah. When I go to a new country, I don't want to download the food delivery app for that because I'm only going to use it for the 1 week that I'm there.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, totally. And another example is in Kazakhstan, where I am originally from.
Right.
We have a super app called Kaspi. It's used to be a bank, like number 5, number 6 bank, very small. Now it's a $25 billion company listed on NASDAQ, printing cash, $2 billion net income. Like probably they make more money in profit than some of the fintechs generate in revenue in the world.
Right.
And essentially what they've done is from strategy point of view, turn just a simple banking application into an app where you can order groceries, buy iPhone, buy your electronics, your kid is going to school, buy all the school supplies, book a holiday trip, book flights, do government services. Some crazy features they have, for example, is...
But also because they're a bank, they don't have to partner with another bank to be able to make the payments.
Exactly. And
so it increases their balance sheet as well, which then allows them to do other things
and
too.
Everything, in all features, they have the buy now, pay later. So they can get a loan and stuff. And they like just one interesting feature they have, which nobody knows about, is they have this whole page, they call it government services. And when let's say you have a child, as soon as the child is registered in the system, they send a push notification to the parent saying, "Congrats on your child! You can issue your birth certificate directly inside of the bank app."
Oh, really?
Yes, and you don't need to go to any government office.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and this is just one of them. Like they have a lot of other features.
So, if we believe, and I've been talking about this, I told you this offline, right? For years, that established incumbent companies that have a large user base, take any big like financial services firm, you mentioned the bank, so it's the perfect example, that they should all try to become super apps. And my example was, why not, if the ride-hailing companies are becoming financial services companies, why can't financial services companies add ride-hailing? Because you already have them there, and there's no infrastructural cost to you. You don't have to buy vehicles, you don't have to hire drivers, you just give them access to it. So I believe in this really strongly. But technologically, I'm curious, right? Again, because I did a lot of tech integrations when I was sitting on a trading desk. But if the system is built for one thing and highly optimized for that, unless you, in my experience, right, unless you had a vision earlier to be able to add in other applications, the building on the other applications is hard. So technologically, what kind of infrastructure is necessary, and what is that integration like? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there are a few kind of strategies that different companies adopted. One is just simply starting to build everything in-house. And on the app side, it's not like a backend. Obviously, you'll need to decouple everything, but you can still build different features, and the app is just going to become like a big piece of code.
Yeah.
So that is fine. The approach that we've taken and the Alipay and WeChat taken is what's called a mini app platform approach. So what WeChat innovated in 2015 or 16 is they developed they call it mini program platform, which sits inside of their app. And now third-party developers can build their features and mini apps directly inside of WeChat.
So now you have two ways to build.
Yeah.
One is internally, I can build a mini app that sits on the platform.
Yeah.
But the second way is, I have an idea for an app that I know Alipay or WeChat wants.
Correct.
And I can build that and integrate it in. And if it works, they just leave it there or feature it.
Exactly.
So that it benefits them and it benefits me.
you can think about it as an app store, but directly inside of existing application.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, that helps from the development point of view, because now you're essentially outsourcing the work to a third party. And at the same time, from technology point of view, these mini apps, they sit in the cloud until user prompts to open it.
Right.
So the app is not going to be big because of that. Basically.
So it's not heavy from a usage standpoint and from an infrastructure standpoint.
Yeah.
How about this though? Right. So let's say again, financial services really well. Sort of integrating with the government. The government has an entire ecosystem out there then that can handle customer service and stuff like that. Right. I call the government. I'm working on this thing. But how important is domain knowledge for other services? Again, let's say I could literally myself tomorrow launch a ride-hailing app, right? But do I need the domain expertise to understand how that works to provide the right service, or are there things that you build in that make that easier?
Yeah, so that's where I guess our kind of product comes in handy, because in essence, what we try to do is partner with existing service providers for different services. For example, ride-hailing you mentioned, we have a partner on the back end who built the mini app. And they know what's the best practices. They build the mini app, and now we can launch it. We just change the skin, change the design, and we can launch it inside of any app, and they can have the ride-hailing. So technically, you would feel it's the bank who launched it, for example, but under the hood, it's going to be the real ride-hailing app which launches. So yeah, domain experience is quite important.
Right.
But at the same time, again, you see examples where companies they launch completely unrelated products. Like a recent one last week, New Bank launched New Cell. It's a telco in Brazil.
They launched a telco.
Yeah, they launched a telco inside of a bank app, a proper local telco. So we saw them launch eSIM,
like an
eSIM.
MVN? Or?
Exactly, MVNO, yeah. And they call it New Cell, and it's directly embedded inside of their bank app. So you can argue that telco and banks are two different things, but the guys are, for a reason, $90 billion company. They're taking bold steps to really capture completely new markets. Same in Kaspi in Kazakhstan. They were like a bank. They launched marketplace. They're killing it there. They launched groceries. They now own 50% of the market, and they launched travel. So they pretty much killed all the local online travel agents, and now they own the travel space as well. So I guess you can enter a new market as well if needed.
So what does it look like from your perspective and from your partner's perspective when you go to a particular company and say, every app should be a super app? Again, something we talked about offline. I've believed this for a long time, and I've been kind of waiting for someone to develop this thing. Actually, it's really two questions. What does it look like from Boxo's view? Like, what do you as a team have to develop? Is it all these mini apps? Like, how do you know what to do and how to do that? Yeah. And then what's the sales thing like where you're like, you should do this? Is it one mini app at a time to kind of whet the appetite? How does that work?
Yeah, so when we say a super app, in the context of our business, we kind of take a step back and we say, there are super apps like WeChat that have millions of services. But at the same time, you can think about very, very niche use cases. For example, imagine a airline app which can offer some specific services in travel space. You can argue you cannot call it super app because it doesn't have a lot.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Go ahead, yeah.
But at the same time, it's somewhat super app because now they have instead of just selling airline tickets, they can sell you, let's say, a trip to Disneyland or eSIM, or you can book an airport transfer. And that's where we essentially, from our business point of view, we think creatively. Let's say you as an app have a certain user base. What is the closest vertical to your user base and your
as a first step,
which is super relevant, so that when we launch it, they'll start using this feature straight away.
It just feels more normal, right?
Exactly.
So if I'm a finance app and I add in insurance,
correct,
it kind of feels like it makes sense,
exactly,
as opposed to pizza delivery,
exactly,
kind of thing, which feels like, why am I here?
Exactly, yes, totally right, yeah. And this basically applies to any field, like in finance, financial services, in let's say travel services. But then that's where the magic kind of happens when you start cross-selling from different verticals. Like imagine in a travel app, you can open a Revolut card, because now they know that you're traveling out. Or in a bank app, you can book a hotel and get, let's say, a loan for that product, right? So that's where, I guess, we want to try to move at some point.
So how do you know, and you talked about this a little bit, maybe it's not a super app yet. How do you know when it's super app? Is it 3 mini apps? Is it 5? Or is it having 2 things that work together and 1 thing that's just completely different? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think there's no clear definitions, more like branding.
Right, but don't you feel like you can actually define this space in a way, right?
Yeah.
Because you are the facilitator of building super apps for other apps.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for us, we call anyone like a super app as long as they launch at least one service.
With Boxo.
Yeah, correct. Exactly. Yeah, like what we see is, again, from just branding point of view, some apps, they adopt the super app kind of in their name. Let's say Trip is like just calling themselves all-in-one travel app.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Then the Alipay and these guys, Revolut calls themselves financial super app, quite outright.
Yep.
Like they're publicly.
But again, they're defining themselves financial super app.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
But they launched like hotel booking, So
fair enough.
Yeah.
But it still needs to get paid for anyway. We can go back and forth on that.
Yeah.
Do you get a sense that over time that there's going to be kind of an ecosystem for all ecosystems, if that makes sense, where at some point Boxo becomes the gateway into every ride-hailing app or every financial services app, in the sense that consumers are always going to want to do comparisons.
Yeah.
Right. So I use this one super app, but maybe I want the services of another one.
Yeah.
At some level, since you're writing all the integrations, do you ever think about operating up here?
Yeah.
And then connecting to all of them? So if I want a ride, I can ask for a ride from here, and from here.
Yeah.
And just get the best value for me as a consumer.
Yeah. This is like ideal scenario where we're getting to a maturity where we have multiple service providers that we can integrate inside of one app. So typically we try to stick to one.
I get it.
Just so that people are not confused.
Right.
But like let's say if at some point it makes sense to offer multiple providers because of certain reasons. Maybe one is cheaper, but quality is not as good, but another one is more premium, but it's more expensive.
Right.
But you, as a user, you can choose, and that's ideal. Like that means that we are at a point where super app is really taking off, and users are adopting.
Right.
Correct. Like in WeChat, for example, you can order Didi, but you can also order a bunch of other taxi services, and same with Alipay. And you choose. Actually, the way in Alipay it's designed is, imagine like Grab app, but there's literally one toggle where you tap on it and it changes the provider.
Right.
Yeah, so no one's seen it in the world because no one has done it except in China.
Right.
Yeah.
What I want to see is dynamic changing.
Yeah.
Right. So I can get the best service for myself. Anyway,
Correct.
This has been awesome.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being here. Kaniyet Rayev, the founder and CEO at Boxo. Thank you so much for coming and doing this.
Thanks so much.
I can't wait to see what happens to Boxo in the future.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.